Hi folks, today we're going to talk about the standard chart of accounts inside QuickBooks Online. We're going to talk about how to manipulate that chart of accounts and customize it to your liking. And we're also going to talk about importing a chart of accounts that you might already have set up in Excel. I personally have a set of chart of accounts that I use for my clients based on the different circumstances. So I'm going to show you, if you happen to have an Excel spreadsheet like mine with a chart of accounts, how you would import that into QuickBooks and replace the chart of accounts that's in there. Now, the reason why we're going to talk about chart of accounts is because chart of accounts is the heart of your accounting system. If your chart of accounts is not set up or matched to your industry, to your business needs, you're not going to have a pleasant accounting experience and you're not going to get good reports. So it's really, really important that the chart of accounts matches your business needs. Okay, let's jump right to it. I'm in the QuickBooks Online website. I'm going to set up a brand new account from scratch so I can show you the demonstration for the people that are starting from scratch. And if you are going to set up a new account as well, use the link in my description, which should give you a 30% discount for 12 months. It's an affiliate link, and I'll put that in the description. And it's a free trial anyway, so if you want to practice while we do this and not have to sign up with QuickBooks, you can use that link anyway. But if you have a real company and you're going to get into QuickBooks Online, use that link. It will behoove you. Now, it doesn't matter which version I use, whether I go to Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, or Advanced. It doesn't really matter. They're all going to look exactly the same. So since it's a free trial anyway, no credit card required, I'll set up a free QuickBooks Online Advanced free trial account. In here, I'm going to put my email address, my cell phone number, and my password, and sign up for the account. Then I'm going to click on Continue with Trial. I'm not going to set up payroll at the moment. And then we're going to let it go through the motions, and we're going to start answering some of the questions that is asking you to set up the account from scratch. So once I answer all the questions, it's going to proceed to creating the new account. I'm going to click here where it says let's go, and it's going to take me to the home screen of QuickBooks Online. So if any of you are setting up accounts from scratch, this is probably going to be similar to the same experience you're going to have. I'm going to X out of any pop-up windows that we have, and we're looking at the home screen. Most important thing is here, the left navigation page. We're going to go here where it says bookkeeping. It's going to open up to chart of accounts under manage. And that's how we get to the chart of accounts. If for whatever reason you don't like this left navigation bar, you can go up here to the top right to the gear menu, and you can also get to the chart of accounts from there. So either way will allow you to get into the chart of accounts, because the first time I open the chart of accounts in this company, it's going to ask me to hit that button, see your chart of accounts, and then for the very first time, you're going to be seeing your chart of accounts. Now, if you want to, you can actually export this chart of accounts in Excel by clicking on the Run Report menu here in the top. Click on Run Report. And then once you have it in this sort of report format, you can click on the Export button on the top right here, and then click on Export to Excel. Now, why you would do that, I really don't know. Some people want to have a backup of that standard chart of accounts that QuickBooks creates for them. Some people want to print it, analyze it, work with the team in terms of going through the accounts that they need, they don't need. It's just sometimes it's easier to have this printed and a little bit more tangible. I'll put a link in the description below for you to download that Excel file if you don't want to create a brand new QuickBooks file like I just did to export the chart of accounts as we have it. So I will put a link in the description for that. Now I'm going to go back here really quick, and we're going to go through the chart of accounts, but unfortunately, it's really difficult to appreciate a chart of accounts in this state. It is much easier to appreciate it in a report format. Now, unfortunately, the way QuickBooks Online is set up, if a account doesn't have any transactions associated with it, when you run a report, which the chart of accounts should show up in that report, like a profit and loss or the balance sheet, they're going to show up blank. So what I'm going to do, and you're not going to see this part through the video, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a journal entry where I'm basically going to add a 0 in every one of those accounts in order for me to be able to run a report that actually shows every single account in it. So I'll show you really quick, just so you get some context. So when you actually look at the report, you see what I mean. In the business overview tab, I'm going to go to reports and I'm going to run a profit and loss report. That's essentially the most common report that we run. And right now the report is showing blanks because there's absolutely no transactions, nothing, no activities in those accounts. So I'm going to create a quick journal entry to add a 0 into every one of those accounts. So then when we run the P&L, the profit and loss, you get to see the accounts structure in the way they will look like in a report. So let's do that really quick. So I created a journal entry where I put basically a value on every single account. That way, with a journal entry that contains every single chart of accounts account, now I can show you a report that shows where those accounts land in the report. So before I did that, when I went into my chart of accounts, only really place to appreciate or look at the chart of accounts was simply in the chart of accounts screen, which is fine. Most accountants, advanced users understand what this means when they look at it here, but it makes a lot more sense when you see it in a report. So let's go into business overview and let's pull up report number 1, which is going to be a profit and loss report. I'm going to run that report first. Then I'm going to just duplicate this tab here. And then the next one I'm going to run is a balance sheet. So I'm going to come back here, go back to the report list, and then select balance sheet. And then now that I have both next to each other, I can now appreciate what this looks like. So I'm going to split off these tabs. I'm going to split off one tab here to the right, and I'm going to kind of organize it halfway in the screen. So we see the balance sheet, and then the other one, I kind of split the other side of the screen, get rid of the left navigation bar, and then we see a profit and loss. And this is probably the way to sort of enjoy and understand your standard default chart of accounts or whatever chart of accounts you have. So chart of accounts is split into 2 categories. We're going to have the profit and loss accounts and the balance sheet accounts. And the easiest way to kind of understand this is I'm going to collapse all the major categories here. And then in the profit and loss accounts, your profit and loss accounts, you're essentially going to have 5 categories of accounts. You're going to have an income account, a cost of goods sold account, an expense account, an other income account, and an other expense account. We'll get into the details of that in a second, but I'm trying to explain what this means contextually in case you've never seen a chart of accounts before. On the balance sheet accounts, you're going to have a current asset account. Actually, you're going to have a bank account, an accounts receivable account, a current asset account, or a fixed asset account, or an other asset account. So these are your types: bank account, other current asset, accounts receivable, fixed asset, and other asset. On the liability side, we're going to have the accounts payable account. We're going to have other current liabilities. We're going to have long-term liabilities, and we're missing one here, which is your credit card. QuickBooks, for whatever reason, never really creates a default credit card account, even though it does create a default cash account or a default bank account for some reason. And then we have the equity account. So your chart of accounts are going to be one of those categories. Again, we have income, expenses, other income, other expenses, cost of goods sold, we forgot that. So that's 5 categories from profit and loss. And then we have bank account, other current asset, accounts receivable, fixed asset, other asset, accounts payable, current liabilities, long-term liabilities, and credit card. 9 types in the balance sheet account. So we're going to go back into the chart of accounts here. So I'm going to log into the chart of accounts again so we can see it. When you're in the chart of accounts, I'm going to expand this a little bit. When you're in the chart of accounts, you're going to see the name of your account, and then under type, it's going to be one of those 5 P&L types or those 9 balance sheet types that I discussed. By default in QuickBooks Online, if your accounts are sorted by type, you're going to see all your balance sheet accounts first, and then you're going to see the profit and loss accounts second. I'm going to scroll down here all the way to the point that I no longer see a 0 or a number under the column that says QuickBooks balance. Once you no longer see a running balance, you're no longer seeing a balance sheet account. It's going to make the switch from equity into income. And once you see that switch from equity into income, all the accounts below equity are your profit and loss accounts. So what does that mean? That means that any account that you create that's either an income account, a cost of goods sold account, an expense account, let's go down to other income or other expense, is going to fall into the profit and loss account that we just showed you here. And now I'm going to expand them. So I'm going to click on collapse and then expand one more time. I'm going to expand them. So now we see individual accounts that are created. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 income accounts were created by default in the standard chart of accounts, and their income under the income category or the income type. Now, prior to modifying this chart of accounts, I'm going to click on collapse up here in the top. Click on collapse, and then I'm not going to show any subcategories or sub-accounts. At the moment, I'm working with this default chart of accounts. I'm going to click on the print button, and then we're going to see how many pages by default it takes. And one of the things is kind of my pet peeve here is that this chart of accounts as it stands, even collapse, takes more than a page. Is one of the reasons why I like my chart of accounts, because mine is only one page, which I'll show you later. So if I could give you one sort of hot tip here when you start modifying the chart of accounts, it would be to delete accounts or make accounts sub-accounts of others to the point that when you hit print or when you do a print preview to PDF, a collapsed chart of accounts should only be one page. Let's go to the chart of accounts to add the new account. So when I go create a new income account, let's say I'm looking at the profit and loss report and I'm saying, you know what? Consulting income is missing because I want to create a category for consulting income. So you would go into your chart of accounts and you would go into the new button on the top right to create a new account. And on the new category name or category name in here, you would call this consulting income. And then it says select category, asking you, hey, what is this? Income, expense, right? What we talked about just now. So I'm going to click on income and then I click on next. And then it's going to ask me, hey, does this fall into any of these categories that you see here? So if I do see that it falls into some of these categories, I'll pick sales, for example. And unfortunately, the way this workflow of new accounts creation works, it forces you to create it as a sub account, and we'll talk about that in a second. Then I'm going to click on select, and I don't need to create a description. I'm just going to click on save. So the new consulting income account has been created. I'm going to scroll down here, and I have essentially modified the initial or standard chart of accounts. You see consulting income right there as a subcategory of sales. So generally, when you go edit this category, this account, consulting income, I should be able to get it out of that sales subcategory. Unfortunately, under this mode, this is called business mode, I may have that restriction. So I'm going to show you how to change something, which is going from business view to accountant view, a little bit sort of higher end view or more complicated, more accountant-driven view. So I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top right and switch this to accountant view. When I switch it to accountant view, I'm going to get a little bit more functionality inside of the chart of accounts module, and I can kind of fix or change that account that I created. Let's find it here under sales somewhere, consulting income. Now I'm going to edit this account, and this screen is going to look a little bit different. This will allow me to get it out of sales and put it just into the general income category. So when it's in the general income category, I don't need to have it as a subcategory of sales. And you see right here in the preview, that shows you this is going to land right here under billable expense income because it goes in alphabetical order. Now here's this tax form section. You just have to pick one of these. I'll pick here sales of or service fee income, and then click on save, and then I'll click on yes, and then we're gonna go down, scroll down one more time, and then we're gonna see that my consulting income account is now its own category. If I go back into my profit and loss and then click on run report, it's not going to show up yet because it doesn't have any transactions ever. So I'm just going to go back into that journal entry I created when I first got started, and I'll add a line in here. So I'm going to go here so I'm going to type in here consulting income, and there it is, and I'll just add a 0 to this. And again, that's that weird journal entry trick. It's just so I can preview my chart of accounts in a report even when I don't have any transactions. I want to remind you really quick that when I started this video, I created a brand new account from scratch just so I can show you this with no information, because it makes it more difficult to show you this with some information. So it's just a bunch of zeros, and now I see my consulting income category in there. So that's the standard chart of accounts in a nutshell. Now I can delete any of these accounts or make them inactive. I can create new ones as I just showed you. I can also merge accounts. So if I have two accounts that seem to be redundant, so let's say, for example, these loans to officers and loans to shareholders are essentially the same thing. I can take one account and rename it to the same as the target account. So for example, let's say I want to get rid of loan to shareholders and merge it with loans to officers. So I'm going to edit it. I'm going to click on edit, and then I'm going to change this to loans to officers in the name. So officers. I'm going to make them the same tax form section or the same detail type. That way they can merge. And then once you see these two things in red here, letting you know, hey, I got two accounts with the exact same name. When I click on save, it should now just warn you, hey, you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to hit yes, and that's going to ask me, would you like to merge the accounts? It's exactly what I want. Click on yes, and that will allow you to merge them. Once I click on save and I merge the accounts, if there was any history in those, in this case it wasn't because this was a blank file with a bunch of zeros, but if there was any history, that would be merged as if two accounts never existed. We can also delete them individually, so I can go into any individual account you see here. Click here where it says make inactive, and it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to make this inactive? I click on yes, and simply I just made one individually inactive. I can also select multiple of them. Okay, so I can click one, shift click on one, click on batch actions, and then click on make inactive, and then click on make inactive, and that's going to make a whole bunch inactive. Or I can select all of them and then go to batch actions and make inactive and click on got it. Now, once you make a whole bunch of accounts inactive, you might run into an account that cannot be deleted or it cannot be made inactive, and that's going to be defaulted to the ones you see on the screen. Payments to deposit, uncategorized asset, opening balance equity, retained earnings, services, uncategorized income, uncategorized expense, and reconciliation discrepancies are default accounts that cannot be deleted. QuickBooks won't let you delete them because they're used in specific functions sort of behind the scenes. Once these accounts are deleted, I can very easily import a chart of accounts I happen to have in Excel. So I'm going to pull up my Excel spreadsheet prior to importing so you can see exactly what we're doing. So I have a couple of chart of accounts, as I mentioned earlier. I have one for construction companies. So whenever I'm going to use, I have a customer that's a construction company, I will import this specific chart of accounts that contains all the account numbers, all the accounts, the type, detail type, everything that QuickBooks needs in order for it to import. Now I'm going to zoom in the view here a little bit just to show you what your spreadsheet will need to have for you to be able to import a chart of accounts into QuickBooks. The first thing you're going to need is the account name. If you have sub-accounts, so for example, here under income, I have a sub-account called equipment rental income. I have another sub-account called subcontracted income. Notice that there's a colon in between the two. So you have to import the structure of the accounts sort of in that order for it to work. You also need the type, and it needs to match those it's like 14 different types that we discussed earlier. And you need to have a detail type for QuickBooks in order to recognize it. And this is a particular subset of specific things that QuickBooks forces you to put in the detail type. So once I have the spreadsheet in this format, I only need these 3 columns here: account type, detail type. Account number is optional if you want to import account numbers, and description is also optional, right? You don't have to have a description. In my chart of accounts, I use a description to make it easier. So this is the construction chart of accounts, and I also have, for non-construction, my own chart of accounts that I use. So for all non-construction customers, I would use this chart of accounts. So in the real world, you would have your own chart of accounts, or you would talk to your own accountant for your accountant to give you their chart of their preferred chart of accounts. Or you could also buy this chart of accounts from me. If you're my customer, you already have it. But if you're not my customer, you could just simply buy the chart of accounts from me. I'll have that in the description below, a link to do that. So anyway, so once I have my chart of accounts ready to import on a spreadsheet like this, then I go into QuickBooks, and I'm going to go here in the new button on the top right. Then I'm going to click on new, actually not new. I'm going to click on the drop down menu and then click on import. You have to be able to import the chart of accounts hitting that button. Then I'm going to click on browse. I'm going to go find the chart of accounts in my computer. It's going to make my computer somewhere, so I know where it is. It's right here. And I'm going to pick let's do not the construction one. Let's pick the QBO chart of accounts where my personal accounts are equity. Complicated, but I have multiple different versions of that. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to click on open. And before I do that, I just want to show you this thing called here, download a sample file. If you click on that, you can actually open up an Excel spreadsheet that they give you, also giving you the template. So if you don't have a template, you can use their template. So you can build your own chart of accounts or copy and paste it from your other spreadsheet you may have and make sure it follows this specific structure. So okay, so once I have the Excel structure the way it needs to, I click on browse, load it in there. Then I click on next. Then it's going to ask me, hey, could you map the column? So which is a column for detail type in my particular spreadsheet? Let me just pull it up here one more time so you see it. All the columns here in the top, detail type, account name, account number, and type, they're in the same order and they match how QuickBooks wants it. Let me just zoom this in one more time. So detail type, account name, account number, and account type. I have it in that specific order. So when QuickBooks reads it, it knows to map it. If these are not mapped, then you have to click on the drop-down menu here and pick which of the columns you are going to map these to. Then and one of the bad things about this is you can't import descriptions for some reason. Although I have them in my spreadsheet for my own reference, you can't import descriptions. So then I'm going to click on next, and then it's going to say, hey, you got 150 accounts ready to be imported. And then we get to see our entire chart of accounts in here. And then I'm going to click on import. So once I click on import, it should load in my chart of accounts. If it finds any duplicates, like this reconciliation discrepancies of opening balance equity, we can just skip those. Those were already in there anyway, so we didn't need to import them. And I'll X out of that and then click on yes. And now when I get back into my chart of accounts, you're going to see the new chart of accounts I imported in here. So that's all the chart of accounts, pretty much the way I wanted to set it up. Now I'm going to show you something really interesting. Prior to me importing that chart of accounts from Excel, I had already done a journal entry that included all the accounts that I have already deleted. So what is the P&L going to look like now? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go to profit and loss, and then I'm going to run on the profit and loss from the reports. And you can notice that almost all the accounts now say deleted, okay? And the reason why they say deleted is because this is the old chart of accounts, the default chart of accounts that QuickBooks created from scratch. And if you remember, I deleted all that, I got rid of that, and I imported my own. Now, I'm not saying you should do that. The default chart of accounts that comes with QuickBooks is pretty good. I just happen to like my own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another journal entry with the new accounts that I created. And then I'm going to run a report for a different period that doesn't contain that journal entry I created. So I'll I'll just give you a quick preview to that. So I'm going to click on Run Report, and I just run a different period. It doesn't contain that journal entry, and now the report is back to blank. So now I'm going to import, or I'm going to create a journal entry with all the other accounts that I just imported, and we're going to see what the report looks like with the new chart of accounts that I just imported. Okay, so I finished doing the journal entry. I'll just show you really quick here. So we got a journal entry with a bunch of amounts there, and I did a couple. So every single account is now covered. So I should be able to run a reports and go to the profit and loss report, and then I'll show a report with a different date range. And now I should see my new chart of accounts with the account numbers all set up in there. There's a couple of these old accounts that got, or those accounts that I couldn't modify that are just sitting there. I'm just going to put those as sub accounts of net sales. We'll go back and we'll go down and see cost of goods sold. Notice that there are two categories for cost of goods sold and subcontractors that have that have children categories or sub accounts. And then we have a third option there, called merchant and credit card fees. Then under expenses, I'm going to collapse the categories. All the categories here are set up. And I could also click on collapse up here, and I collapse all the parent categories as well, and I can see exactly how my chart of accounts is set up. Now this one here called uncategorized expense, that's the one that I couldn't touch. That's gonna sit there, and then everything else here is under other expenses and other income. That's pretty cleanly set up in there. Reconciliation discrepancies is under other expenses. That's okay. Just the ones missing the account numbers are the ones that QuickBooks didn't let me touch. So if I want to move these three without account numbers on the net sales, I can do that pretty easily. Let me go back into my chart of accounts here. I'm going to sort these by number. So all the ones that are missing an account number will be on the top. And then all these, I'm going to put them under a subcategory. So I'm going to put these under a subcategory for net sales. So all I have to do is edit each one. Where is my next one? That's income, this one. Edit. Okay, that's under net sales. Okay, that's perfect. And then we'll look at this one called uncategorized income. Wonder this one should let me. Yep, yes. And then we have one more, which I think is billable expense income right here. Edit that and make that a subcategory under net sales. Perfect. And that should be all my income categories that didn't have account numbers. They're all part of a subcategory. So I can go back and run my profit and loss report again. And I'll run these on the last day of the year, which is when I did my journal entry. And there we go. If I now collapse net sales, there's no other income accounts in there. I would also have to go back and give these accounts account numbers if I want to, but this is essentially how you clean up the chart of accounts after you have imported a new chart of accounts into it. Now there is sort of one magical thing about my specific chart of accounts is as you go through it and you're seeing the collapsed version of it, so you're not seeing any of the subcategories, even without the subcategories, it's a pretty complete chart of accounts. But once you have not expanded, with all the subcategories, but once you have collapsed it and you try to print this profit and loss account, assuming you don't create new parent categories, I'm going to hit print to show you, is that it all fits in one page, in a single page, which is a kind of a big deal to me because a long chart of accounts, with big profit and loss and balance sheet reports that bleed over to a second page or a third page, become pretty difficult to read. And this is where having everything fit into one page. And my tip is, if you use a chart of accounts like mine or any chart of accounts that fits into one page beautifully, anytime you need to create a new category, find a home under an existing category. Don't create any new parent categories, because if I do create new parent categories, the profit and loss is going to start bleeding into multiple pages. For example, if I try to print this expanded, I'm going to click on print to show you. Now it goes into 4 pages. See that? 4 pages, because there's a lot of information when it's fully expanded. So I never expect someone to have a single page fully expanded profit and loss account, but if you collapse the profit and loss account, my general expectation is that it should fit in a single page. Now, something else to look at is, let's say I'm going to look at multiple months. I'm going to analyze multiple months at once. So let's say I want to look at by month, and I want to look at, let's say, 3 months or 4 months in one shot. When I try to print this report, as long as I can fit it into a regular size, 8.5 by 11 letter size, notice that even with multiple months, you can still fit everything into one page. The limit here, it's about roughly about 5 or 6 months. I think once I start showing 6 months, then it starts bleeding into multiple pages. Let me just double check here. I'm going to put 6 months here on the screen and see if that does bleed. Actually, 6 months works. So that's about your limit. It's just start making it, you start squeezing a lot more months in here. At some point, it'll go to multiple pages. Let's do a whole year here just for the heck of it to see what that looks like. That for sure should move to multiple pages, and it did. Now it officially moves into multiple pages. So that's kind of the trick there, to know how many months you can go. What was it again? I think it was a maximum of 6 months. Let's just try that again. With 6 months, I would just want to verify that it can do 6 months. Yep, 6 months, single page. So that's kind of the soft limit on a really big chart of accounts that fits tightly into a single P&L report. So anyway, any other references I made in this video, they're going to be in the link below. So make sure in the description below, make sure you check all the links. And I hope that was useful. I'll see you on the next one.